Cool. Hey guys, I'm Jonathan Robbins. I'm a Psycho MVP and I'm the Senior Architect at the Royal College of Nursing.
My name's Wesley Lomax. I'm a freelance Psycho Architect and Psycho MVP. And today we're going to take you through our story of moving a Psycho implementation riddled with technical debt to a component-based architecture that is compliant with Helix, facing the usual constraints that developers face.
So yeah, in this presentation we'll cover managing technical debt and moving the solution forward. Kind of give you an idea of our implementation and the technical debt that we faced. We'll cover things what we considered, as well as objectives, and kind of give you the idea of the effects so far. We'll probably share some pitfalls and some lessons learned to make sure you guys don't make the same mistakes we did. So, no one really sets out to create technical debt. Even the most well-intentioned senior developers can and will produce technical debt. Constraints force us to develop things in a certain way they were intended to address later on, maybe in that mythical phase 2. The thing is, not all technical debt is due to developers. It could be the difference between what was promised and what was delivered. And what's more, what's promised can change. What's more, the business evolves, so maybe what they asked for 6 months ago isn't fit for purpose now. And also our own knowledge evolves. So maybe we've got new ways to implement things, it means we need to go back and refactor. And also our processes evolve, maybe CI processes and CD processes. So the point I'm making is that technical debt creeps in and grows over time. So technical debt is inevitable. So how you manage it is what matters.
So, should you pay your technical debts? I think as technical debt rises, so do its consequences. Higher levels of technical debt in a solution will slow you down as you spend more time fighting the code base. Projects with significant technical debt become more complex, making it harder to do things correctly, and eating into the time to do value-add features. Higher levels of technical debt will also make predicting how long a new feature will take become nearly impossible. And I think once you reach a certain level of technical debt, even small changes become unmanageable or chaotic. Eventually, all stakeholders will become frustrated. People will burn out or jump ship. And like any technical debt, it will build up over time, and all those quick and dirty fixes will catch up on you. So, can you just throw everything away and start again? I think not. Not all hope is always going to be lost. If you acknowledge your problems, you can measure and monitor your technical debt. If you review your site code content tree, have a look at what's working in there, what's not. Have a look at your template structure and see what you can keep or what you need to change. Also have a look at your tech stack and see what's working there and what's not. I think even a legacy project can be updated into something that's maintainable, healthy, and valuable to a business.
So yeah, you're probably thinking, well, why should I make all this work for myself? Why should I bother resolving all this technical debt? And first off, you want to consider raising the quality limit. So if the foundations aren't sound, what's built on top can only be so good. So obviously you can imagine with a skyscraper, if the foundation was slant, no matter how impressive the penthouse suite is, all this furniture can be sliding out the window. So in our case, we had a poor content search implementation, which obviously led to a poor site search. But that also meant that recommended for you functionality, personalization, performance, and maintainability all suffered as a result. Also, code decay is actually a real thing. So a code environment changes and progresses in terms of its KPIs, infrastructure, its audience, its stakeholders. So if the code is not progressing with it, eventually it becomes less suitable, eventually a hindrance, and ultimately technical debt. And you're probably thinking, well, this is going to cause a lot of pain for you, and to be honest, it probably is. We cause a lot of issues with each go live, but the thing is, that's only for the short term, and eventually things become more stable. Also, doing this will actually help you preempt some serious rework. You're going to head off some late nights crunching to actually get those feature completes on time. And I've actually seen this, so technical debt has become so bad, it's actually blocked an entire program of change for a client. Also, you kind of want to consider aligning yourself with the direction of the industry. So obviously, Psycho is taking advantage of what Psycho has to offer. Psycho is continuously evolving and changing, so we need to make sure we're keeping up with that. And probably the most relevant to you guys in the room right now is actually improve as a developer. So maybe doing some new technologies, new concepts and ways of working, and maybe actually learn some of those buzzword technologies like JSS or maybe even a headless CMS. I think at least keep your solution open to modifications for those things. And you probably think, well, clients don't really want to pay for this. They might not see or understand the value, or maybe even see it as a developer's problem or even the developer's fault. But the thing is, they need to consider the cost of ownership. The thing is, it's going to be longer to implement functionality, and those functionalities are more prone to issues. The thing is, just because a client is not willing to pay for it doesn't mean it doesn't need to be done. And also, undeveloping is fun. Resolving technical debt by resolving bad code that you've hated for about 6 months is a great liberating feeling. We kind of thought of ourselves as undevelopers while doing that.
So this is what it all looked like before we started. So this solution here supported the main Royal College of Nursing website and 20 or so regional and campaign websites. It was delivered in 2015 by a partner. It was using SUGCON 8.0 with an MVC implementation. It had Glassmapper and TDS in there, roughly kind of N-tier architecture. So there was 11 projects in there, 3 TDS projects and 2 test projects. It was broken up by technology, as you can see, with business layers, entity layers, interface projects. And there was lots of helper classes and static classes. There wasn't really a consistent approach to the implementation, but there was some good bits in there, but there was also bad bits as well. So this was how the solution was structured. This is a dependency graph taken with n-depends. The size of the boxes here are relative to the number of lines of code in the project. As you can see, the business project was by far the largest and become the de facto dumping ground in the solution. The main pain point we had was the relationship between entities and interfaces, meaning we couldn't return custom types in our interfaces. And to work around that debt, we started basically developing inside a namespace, inside the business project. There was never really a long-term solution. I think we knew we had to tackle our technical debt. We just didn't know exactly what that was going to look like.
So yeah, to solve our technical debt and move the solution forward, I figured out what's right for us. So we consider things like team composition because of a number of back-end developers, front-end developers, and architects. We have some juniors, people new to Psycho, and people even new to .NET, so I had to make sure we were getting it right for those guys. Then the team at large, then we actually had the communications team, or like the main power users of Psycho. I also had the marketers trying to use Psycho for what it sells itself on. And then we have about 100 or so content editors, all with varying degrees of IT skills, as well as frequency of use. So some people would use Psycho every day, where some of the content editors would use Psycho every once every 6 months. So I had to make sure we're getting it right for those guys as well. So the Royal College of Nursing is a membership organization and a trade union for nurses in the UK. So we have the challenges of having close to 500,000 members. So this is definitely an enterprise solution, so no cutting corners here. We have to facilitate things like logging on, registration, join, renew, purchasing products, and managing accounts, lots of challenges there. As I mentioned, we're a trade union, so there's legal aspects kind of limit us in developing certain ways. I couldn't just track everything XDB like I usually do. Also, we have varied audiences between the nurses themselves. We actually have researchers, the media, and lobbyists. Jeremy Corbyn actually talked at an annual conference last year during a general election. We actually streamlined that on the site. We also have other varied features. As I said, membership keeps the organization running. We have digital campaigns, political campaigns, online resource, publications, and a charitable arm. In terms of volume of traffic, we have about just over 100,000 unique visitors per week. So obviously, if you've got something wrong, a lot of people would notice. Also, we're not an agency, so some of the challenges you guys face is not really applicable to us, and vice versa. Not all of Helix is relevant to us because we're not trying to transfer functionality between clients. It's more about delivering a progressive product. So however we chose to resolve our technical debt and fix our solution, it had to be right for all those things.
So where did we want to be after all this refactoring? So we wanted to harden our foundations. So we wanted to ensure at the end of this we had a stable and performant website. We wanted to address the problems lowering the quality limit in the solution. And we also wanted to deliver a solution that we could move forward with for future phases. We wanted to get rid of the limitations that N-tier was forcing upon us. We were building upon bad practice just for consistency's sake. And we also wanted to we wanted to get rid of the circular reference problem. It was also forcing bad design decisions on us. We felt there was a lack of control and dependencies throughout the solution, and we wanted to tackle that. But most importantly, we wanted to make sure that future phases of development, so we had membership self-service, My Account, and context marketing projects that all were going to kick off. And we wanted to make sure we could use Psycho to all the capabilities of Psycho and all its features. And then we had the general day-to-day daily headaches that we had in the solutions. We wanted to resolve our design quirks when every implementation has them. We had the hunt for rendering items where the path in the code base didn't match the path in the content tree. It was just hunting around looking for things. But most importantly, we wanted to also make sure Psycho MVC and the power of experience editor, personalization, and A/B testing could be used. It's the whole point of the product, right?
So yeah, what's more, we also want to look into using modern solutions to problems. So we actually have a microservice architecture for our CRM integration. So we understand how Psycho actually fits amongst that, so actually see what common principles can we apply for consistency. Also want to consider dependency injection to swap out implementations per site. Also consider domain-driven development, kind of structure the solution in the way the business talks about it. Also consider module design, and even the JavaScript ecosystem, because we can't make fun of JavaScript forever, unfortunately. But the thing is, there's one key thing we wanted to do, and that was make development great again. Kind of make it a fun solution developing, and actually get rid of those bad code smells you get every single time we open a solution. And actually make it feel like we actually enjoyed our job and actually enjoy the day-to-day of building this thing, instead of actually trying to feel like we're trying to fight the code base just to make a modification or get a project delivered. So before we started tackling the technical debt, we had to get buy-in, and that was from the team, and make sure that it wasn't just me and Wes who actually agreed on this, but actually the team at large. And there was also the stakeholders. I'm not saying we're actually getting involved to actually solve the technical debt itself, but at least keep them informed, so at least when we actually do break the site and one of these deployments is not brand new news to them. We also consider a robust branching strategy. So we actually were breaking the entire solution down, so we want to make sure those commits had no chance of going to live. So therefore, we use Git flow to make sure our feature branches are kept far away from the master branch. And then code review is complete inherently a part of pull requests to make sure we agree on how we actually resolve those technical debts. We also looked at our unit test and regression test plans. We actually had a unit test strategy, spec tests, UI tests, so kind of automate the boring repeat tasks we have to do after every single change. We also need a few resharper licenses to actually help with the heavy lifting actually inside Visual Studio to refactor all those classes. And on the same note, we actually use Cycle PowerShell extensions to do the same thing inside Cycle and the templates and the rendering items. And then lastly, we actually need a bit of bravery because we were breaking the back of our solution. So when it came to first go live, we were kind of very nervous about it all. So what we consider while solving our technical debt, as I mentioned, we actually consider what's right for us in terms of the team. But it's actually the client as well, in terms of the different departments with different requirements, different drivers, and sometimes those things conflict. We consider the solid principles to help ease some technical woes and maybe the single responsibility for that. There's also simplifying fixing support tickets. Maybe the open-close principle can help there, and also help cater for departments that see things differently and want things done differently. And we use dependency injection there. Also consider design patterns, like what patterns we actually use to speed up delivery, so kind of working smarter but not harder. But I didn't say that because development managers in the room. Also consider module design, kind of moving away from this monolithic solution. We don't really want a business layer that could sink like Titanic. And actually help spread ownership amongst the team. So all need to actually know about the feature they're currently working in, so there's no stepping on each other's toes in a massive business layer and actually leading to simpler merges. We actually consider our development standards. Are they actually how we develop to actually help minimize technical debt? Does it actually help us achieve what we want to achieve? And to honest answer, all three would no. So off the back of that, we also consider our content strategy. How does our content on the site actually look? And does our implementation actually support or hinder that strategy? What content actually is on the site as well? What has become unused, so therefore we can delete it? Or what is actually hard to use, so we need to improve it? And obviously we did consider Helix, but not all, which I'll go on to shortly. As Psycho said, be pragmatic, it's not a set of hard and fast rules to follow. So as mentioned, we did differ from Helix in some ways, and one of those key areas was in Habitat, the interfaces and implementations are on the same project. And it actually makes it feel like it's less pluggable. So therefore, we actually use the stay away pattern to actually enforce dependency injection principles. So interfaces and implementations are in separate projects. And therefore, the implementations actually have references to interfaces. It doesn't care how it's done as long as it is done. So in this example, we have the main RCM web app, which has a dependency on the membership feature. It doesn't really care what membership provider we use as long as the contracts are actually implemented. So you actually use Dynamics. Then Dynamics actually need to actually pay for the membership. So therefore, it doesn't actually care how we collect that payment, so there's card details, there's still the direct debit details, as long as we do. So therefore, we actually just have the SagePay project on its own. So that meant we can swap out payment providers quite easily, so we could swap to WorldPay or PayPal without affecting any other project. And this kind of pattern also helped when it comes to resolving technical debt, because it meant we could work on implementations in isolation and actually bring them and swap them in when we're ready to actually completely remove what was currently there. And the key thing you notice, we actually structure the solution in the way the business actually talks about it as well, so it actually helped with clients. So how we actually went about solving the technical debt and moves our implementation forward. So the first off, we kind of chose technology, principles, and design patterns. So we collaborated on ideas. I talked about the technologies and tools to actually achieve those ideas and set what principles to actually help us get there. And again, we've done this as a team rather than just being a solo effort. Off the back of that, we actually rewrote the development guidelines because it's a good place to start. I mean, we've already done the hard work of choosing technologies and tools anyway, so we may as well get it down in writing. The thing is then, the development guides actually turn into how we develop and move forward rather than just being a document of saying what good code looks like. The thing is, we actually use that guide then to actually align everyone. It's a great guide for new starters, and actually, it's going to be the first time you actually have all these ideas and implementations in one place to actually make sure it all fits together and you're maybe not overlooking something. I think it actually gives you a goal to work towards as well. Then we actually complete a solution review. I mean, with the development guidelines, it's a good way to actually review the solution and its debt. And the thing is that approach you're actually reviewing against actually being thought through is not just on a whim. And the thing is actually helped us understand what's actually in our solution and what the pain points are and how it actually matches up to where we want it to be. On the same note, we actually ordered the information architecture in SUGCON. So we completed a content inventory to understand what content is there. And we actually compared it against the information architecture principles in Helix to make sure we're using Cycle in the way Cycle thinks it should be used. And off the back of that, then, we agreed on conventions and hierarchy across all sites, because believe me, across all 20 sites, each one did the same thing slightly differently. It was infuriating. And then we actually had a IA structure to move forward to, again, having that goal to deliver. What this gave us then was a transformational backlog, ultimately tasks. So we actually kept a Kanban board of tasks, just maintained of to do, doing, and done. So we can actually pick up these tasks as and when we could, and actually track how the solution is progressing and the debt is progressing over time. And then finally, we need to agree on an implementation approach, actually getting down to and writing the code itself. The thing is, we couldn't spend 3 months doing this thing. Clients won't pay for it or wait for it. So therefore, we worked on areas as and when we actually came in contact with them. So how we actually paid our debts. As I said, the big bang approach is simply not possible. It would take far too much time away from new projects and new features. And clients want to accept what effectively is a code freeze. So therefore, we didn't want, and actually had a high chance of going something wrong. If you're going to work on this for 3 months and push all at once, chances are it's going to go bang. So we chose the phase approach to kind of roll out these changes over fortnightly releases, starting with our biggest dependency, in our case, which was search. And then we decided to work on features at a time and targeting specific features, not to spread ourselves too thin. For you guys, I definitely recommend using your solution dependency graph to identify the high target areas. The thing is, be pragmatic. Not all technical debt is of equal importance. And then I definitely recommend you consider using the Boy Scout rules. So it's a principle that if you work in somewhere, you leave it in a better state than you found it. So you actually spend 10 minutes to actually refactor the code to be in development guidelines, or refactor to be in line with chosen patterns. We can break down a large method, solve A to do, but ultimately you're solving technical debt as you bump into it. As you can imagine, a handful of developers doing this as they build over the course of 3 months can really turn the solution around.
Okay, so how we tested our work. We did not have a QA or test team, so our release process had to be robust. All code, as John mentioned earlier, was reviewed via a pull request before it was merged. And every build, every commit to every branch was built on the CI server, and our automated test was run. We also monitored code coverage to make sure that was heading in the right direction. And as part of our release build, we had 50 Selenium tests that were executed. So we tested things like purchase paths, site navigation, logging in, logging out, all the core bits of functionality that we didn't want to manually test, we automated. But we also used end-depends to give us a concrete figure of our technical debt. And before our factoring, we had 77 days of technical debt. Now this figure comes from end-depends, as I said, but that left us with 77 days purely solving problems that we couldn't spend adding value to the solution. So it was 77 days of technical debt to pay down, and obviously the longer we left this, the more the interest accrued. And would anyone like to guess our technical debt figure afterwards, after 3 months of the Boy Scout rule, like John said? No guesses? No? We got it down to 14 days. So we reduced that, as I said, 3 months of the Boy Scout rule, once we were working alongside the agreed guidelines that we said. We didn't spend 63 days solving this technical debt. but it was nice to get a before and after comparison and have that concrete figure. So as a breakdown of the individual technical debt before and after. So before we started, we had a technical debt rating of D, a technical debt ratio of 20.83%, and as I said, 77 days of technical debt. And we managed to reduce that to a technical debt rating of B with a ratio of 7.41% and 14 days of technical debt. Now, although we didn't use end-depends to drive our design decisions, it was a nice validation of our work at the end of the, as we were working through this. So it kind of showed we were on the right track. So this is what it looks like now. It's grown a bit. We've got 70 projects and counting, but we've implemented modular design. So we've got feature and foundation layers from Helix. We've reduced our circular reference problem, and we've managed to get a control on dependencies between projects, and the vast majority of projects are loosely coupled now. The stay-away patterns there, which John talked about earlier, so we've got separate interface and implementation projects for all our features. And the legacy N-tier projects are still around, but they are getting smaller, and some of them have moved altogether. As part of this work, we also changed from TDS for serialization and code generation to Unicorn for serialization, and we used Sitecore Code Generator to generate our classes. Previously, we had a 40,000 line TDS classes file, which was just impossible to merge. And this is the current dependency graph. So it's bigger. There's a lot more stuff going on now. But as you can see, there's a clear separation of groupings. So we've got our project layer on the left, the feature layer in the middle, and then the foundation layer on the right. The old N-tier stuff is still there kicking around, as you can see, but it is shrinking and it's getting smaller. Some of the projects have come out altogether now. We still have the glass models, but that's been pushed down to the foundation layer. This is where our auto-generated and custom glass models exist. We're looking at extracting these into the feature layers as well to try and remove all the dependencies down there. Another important difference was each feature now registers its own dependencies with the DI. Previously, that was done in the web project, and that also removed some of the dependencies and makes things a bit more loosely coupled. But this is still a work in progress. I mean, I'm not suggesting this is any way best practice or what we should do, but it's just where we went with our journey. If you have a closer look at one of the features in particular, so this is the magazine feature that we built for the Royal College of Nursing. It covers the 4 publications that they serve on the website. So there's a dependency here on magazines for navigation, to navigate between magazines and articles. And then there, navigation has a dependency on search to do wildcard lookups. And you can see now there's less dependencies, and the dependencies are now controlled. And the implementation projects only reference the interface projects, so they don't care how it's being done as long as it's being done. And what did we take away from this piece of work? I think the main points, we wanted to know where we were heading first. So like I say, we did a lot of work before we just dived into the code and made sure we had everything in place. Collectively decide what you want to achieve and what debt to tackle first. Don't go blindly following Helix. Although it's great to have these guidelines from Sitecore, I think they don't apply to every project. So take the parts that work for you and don't be afraid to make changes. Be careful pulling code weeds. I raised some pretty epic pull requests for John to review, just by a small change. Well, you think it'd be a small change, but it was so tangled, you'd end up ripping up half the solution. Yeah. And now we can talk in the language of the business. So we've stopped talking about technologies, interfaces and entities and stuff like that. And now the features are named after the business. So communication across the company is much easier. Sitecore PowerShell extensions. It really did save personal lives. It's super handy to be able to script the changes and you test them in your local environment and then commit them to source control, and then you can run it in each one of your environments so you deploy. We made a lot of template changes and a lot of content changes for this, which just wouldn't have been practical to do manually. So it's definitely something to look into. And the other thing we ran into was deployment packages. So we were using Octopus Deploy, which was generating a NuGet package. And as we started stripping all these explicit dependencies out, or the code is no longer referenced in the NuGet package. So if you don't check what's in there, you might end up deploying half your site. I use something like a NuGet package manager to check what's inside there to make sure what you actually think you're deploying is what's being deployed.
So yeah, 3 months on, how has solving our technical debt actually helped? So we're definitely not finished this, but it's given an idea so far. So actually handle far higher loads now. When the site was first handed over by the partner, I think we handled about 200 concurrent users before we actually saw some slowdown. Just last month, we had peak traffic due to a political campaign. We actually had 2,500 concurrent users without any slowdown or even the servers running hot. So that was a big achievement for this work. Also, it's going to be less tickets and more development. So we find that business as usual is more about less about fixing support tickets for clients and more about delivering new projects for those clients. So that's making the business happier. Junior developers are setting less fires. Actually finding it easier to work in the solution because they can focus on learning and understand features in isolation. It's actually easier to bring new team members on board because you just take bite-sized chunks of this thing rather than trying to take this whole solution in one go. We're seeing faster implementation times because we're not having to fight the code base just to make modifications. And actually, code is easy to reuse, especially using the stay-away pattern because you have that clear separation. What's more, we actually have in Visual Studio, have a clear pattern to follow, so maybe less experienced developers as us could come in and still implement their own features because you have a very particular pattern to follow. And we're actually getting smaller, more concise pull requests at the end of the day because they're not having this massive change across lots of different projects. We're also seeing easier communications with the client, as Wes said, so we're actually using the same terms to describe features and functionality, and we're actually better able to explain technical complexities and constraints using those same words and using the stay-away pattern graphs. What's more, actually upgrading to SUGCON now and is more simple now. We swapped over engineering code for simple solutions. For example, our main navigation rendering had a dependency on a menu builder class, which also had a dependency on a menu calculator class, which in turn had its own dependency on a menu layout helper class. And that also referenced full partials, which was just complete madness with something just spat out a handful of links. We also removed cycle customizations that were redundant or not used anymore, maybe because the requirements of the business had changed since then, or maybe just because the developers at the time wasn't aware what cycle did out of the box. And the thing is, this actually helped us produce a list of where we had actually customized cycle, what support tickets applied, so therefore we knew what to unpick when we come to upgrading. So to summarize, first off, you guys definitely want to get the approval. So get the approval and buy-in from the team and the stakeholders, and then kind of work together to actually identify the debt. And actually want to actually figure out what's right for you. So in terms of the team, their capabilities, their preferences, and their daily struggles. Think about your implementation. What are the current features? What are the future features? What should you undevelop first? Also think about your client. What exactly they're trying to achieve on the site in terms of their KPIs? And the thing is, what do they always complain about to you? The thing is, just don't go blindly following a helix on this. The next, you actually want to decide how you actually want the implementation to look in 12 months. I mean, what does it even look right now? What is exactly in your solution? Or what actually is used, or what can be thrown away? The thing is, what features are coming up? What does the solution need to handle moving forward? And can you even handle it right now? The thing is, what pains do you never, ever want to deal with again? The thing is, then, you want to find approaches and principles to help you get there in 12 months, identify the technologies and tools, learn some new design patterns and approaches, and then get the whole team involved in this so it's not a solo effort. The thing is, if you write this all up, and there you go, you have your brand new development guidelines that actually are relevant. You want to review the solution against all this to create a backlog, so use the development guidelines and the IA principles of Helix to identify tasks. Make sure you track this in the simplest way possible. You don't want to spend too much time managing this. So definitely just create a Kanban board in Trello will do. And then finally, agree actually how you want to implement those changes with minimum risk. Don't go killing yourself trying to do all this in one single release because you will kill yourself, or probably someone else in the business will do it for you. The thing is, don't discount the Boy Scout rule. It will definitely get there because we've made a massive change with this small amount of work. And that's it. Go break your site. Just don't let technical debt do it for you. Thanks very much. Cool.
Questions?
We should have a guy giving questions, but probably not.
I don't know. We have got a mic, but I'm not so sure what to do. Can you shout?
You showed this slide with days of technical debt.
Yeah.
What tool did you use for that?
Sorry if it wasn't clear. It's Depends. It is a paid-for product. I think it's about £200 for a license, but there's a 30-day trial, so it's quite useful to install. There's some we only scratched the surface of what's in there. There's lots and lots of detail in the product, but it's definitely something worth checking out. Yeah.
I'm interested in how you managed to get buy-in from your leadership.
Yeah, it was a little bit difficult. I think, without putting too fine a spin on it, I think that we had been burnt by the partner. So I think when we actually come in and started talking about how we want to move things forward, they kind of were very receptive to what we were planning to do. Obviously, some of the stuff in terms of what we want to achieve was very technical, but the thing is, I think it's just having that trust that you're hiring the right experts with the subject matter experts to actually tell you what you need to do. So I think it's obviously helpful to have kind of receptive stakeholders as well, actually able to kind of also convey that up further up the line.
I don't think we didn't freeze project work for this as well. We kind of did it alongside the project work. I mean, we did a lot of planning up front, but then this wasn't a 3-month project to do this. It was alongside the other work that we were doing, so it was easier to get buy-in, I guess. I think that's part of the Boy Scout rule, is where you don't need a massive project to do it, so it does help. Anyone else? No?
Cool.
Well done.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.